The house was silent in the way only enormous wealth can afford, a silence padded by thick carpets, guarded gates, and unspoken fears, and in that silence lived Richard Hale, a self-made millionaire who trusted numbers more than people and systems more than promises, because years ago life had taught him a lesson so cruel it carved permanent lines into his face. His only son, Ethan, once a bright, running, laughing child, had been left paralyzed after a caretaker's single moment of negligence. A moment that shattered a spine and a father's faith at the same time. Since that day, Richard built walls not just of stone and money, but of control. Doctors were hired, therapists rotated, security systems upgraded, and finally, after 3 different maids quit within months, each complaining of emotional pressure, Richard did what he never told anyone: he had cameras. Not the obvious kind. Tiny lenses embedded in smoke detectors, picture frames, even a teddy bear on Ethan's shelf, all feeding into a private server only Richard could access. He justified it to himself every night the same way: protection is not paranoia when you've already lost once. Ethan, now 12, lay confined to a motorized bed in a sunlit room, his mind sharp, his body unresponsive from the chest down, his eyes often staring at the ceiling not because he was bored, but because hope was easier to manage when it stayed distant. Then came Maria. She arrived without references from big agencies, only a handwritten letter and eyes that didn't flinch when Richard's lawyer listed rules thicker than a contract. She spoke softly, moved carefully, and never once asked about the cameras she didn't know existed. Richard watched her closely from day one, expecting cracks, impatience, shortcuts, indifference, but days turned into weeks, and the screens showed nothing alarming. Just routine. Too routine. He almost shut the system down out of boredom until one late night, unable to sleep, he opened the live feed again. What he saw made his breath stop. Maria sat beside Ethan's bed long after her shift should have ended, the room dim except for a small lamp. She wasn't on her phone. She wasn't cleaning. She was talking. Not the cheerful caregiver chatter he'd seen before, but something deeper, something raw. She was telling Ethan about her own childhood, about growing up poor, about a brother who had once been told he would never walk again after an accident. Richard leaned closer to the screen. Ethan, who rarely spoke more than necessary, was responding, not with words, but with his eyes, tracking her, alive in a way Richard hadn't seen in years. Then Maria did something that made Richard's heart pound violently against his ribs. She placed Ethan's hands on a small drum she had brought from home and gently guided his fingers, not forcing, not rushing, just allowing. "Your body listens more than you think," she whispered. "It just needs patience." Richard felt anger rise. This was not in the therapy plan. This was unauthorized. Dangerous. He reached for his phone to call security, then stopped. On the screen, Ethan smiled. Not the polite smile he gave doctors, not the practiced one for his father, but a real one, wide and trembling, as if discovering a forgotten language. Over the next days, Richard watched obsessively. Maria sang to Ethan when she thought no one could hear. She read to him not from textbooks but from adventure novels, voicing every character, making him laugh. She spoke to his legs as if they were sleeping friends, massaging them gently, telling them stories, never once expressing pity. And then came the moment that changed everything. One afternoon, during a routine physical therapy session overseen remotely, Maria asked the therapist for a minute alone. Richard watched, jaw tight. She knelt, looked Ethan straight in the eyes, and said, "I won't lie to you. This will hurt. But pain isn't the enemy. Fear is." She placed a mirror near Ethan's feet so he could see them clearly. Slowly, patiently, she guided his breathing, syncing it with small visual cues. Minutes passed. Nothing. Then, barely perceptible but unmistakable, one toe twitched. Richard froze. His hands began to shake. The therapist shouted. Maria didn't celebrate. She just smiled softly and said, "See. You're still in there." That night, Richard confronted her. His voice was cold, controlled, the voice that had ended boardroom wars. "I know about what you've been doing," he said. Maria didn't deny it. She nodded. "Then you know I never hurt him," she replied. "I would die before I did." Richard accused her of crossing boundaries, of risking false hope. Maria listened, then said something that shattered him. "Sir, your cameras protect his body. Who is protecting his spirit?" Silence fell between them like a verdict. Richard fired her on the spot. Or so he thought he would. Instead, he walked into Ethan's room later that night and found his son awake, eyes burning with determination. "Don't send her away," Ethan said. His voice cracked. "She sees me." In that moment, Richard understood the truth he had been avoiding for years: protection without trust is just another prison. He rewatched months of footage, not as a judge, but as a father, and saw what he had missed: love disguised as labor, healing hidden in humanity. Richard did the unthinkable. He removed the cameras. All of them. The next morning, he apologized to Maria. He funded an independent therapy program based on her methods. Months later, Ethan stood for the first time, trembling, supported, crying, alive. The media called it a miracle. Richard knew better. It wasn't technology that saved his son. It was courage, compassion, and a maid who refused to treat a broken body like a broken soul. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that sometimes the greatest protection is faith in the right people, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because stories like this don't just entertain, they change the way we see the world, and you won't want to miss the next one.